What's up, you guys? It's your girl Allison Adams, aka the Fly Girl Diaries, and today I'm starting a new series and we're focusing on the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, chapter by chapter. So today is chapter 4 and we're going to jump right into it. Boom. So chapter 4 is Principles of Flight, and we're going to be going over this in 5 minutes or less, or stick with me. Feel free to pause the video if you need it, and don't forget to leave a big thumbs up for that YouTube algorithm so people can know about chapter 4, Principles of Flight. We're going to jump into chapter 4 of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. You can look it up online. Just type in Pilot's Handbook Aeronautical Knowledge and you can find a free PDF on the FAA's website. So first topic, air. What is air? We could go into the definition of exactly what is the composition of air, but that really doesn't have any kind of large effect on us as pilots. So we're going to go into more of the concepts. First off, air, it acts like a fluid. So it behaves like a fluid. We have viscosity, which is the resistance to flow. We have pressure, which is how much of a force is applied to an object, and we have friction. So think air friction, where the molecules stick microscopically to the surface of the wing. And we're gonna get more into how that affects lift in a second. So we have atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure is the weight of the air above us on any given day. We have what's called a standard day, so that way we can measure the differences between a high or low pressure system coming in. A standard day is 29.92 inches mercury, 15 degrees Celsius, or 59 degrees Fahrenheit. We use this as a base to be able to calculate different altitudes based on the pressure of the day. So there's two ways we can do this. We can plug 29.92 in our altimeter and calculate it from there, or we can do math, which if you don't have an altimeter on hand, it does work. So all we do is subtract whatever our pressure altitude setting is from our standard day. So today it's 29.93. So 29.92 minus 29.93 gives you a number of negative 0.01. So it's read tens of thousands, thousands, hundreds, and then tens of feet. So in our case, our altitude is going to be reading negative 10 of what our standard pressure is going to be. So in the case of negative 10, that means we're going to act as though we are flying a higher, 10 feet higher than what we normally would on a standard day. All the thought we're going to put into that for today, because again, this is just chapter 4. We're getting into the very basics, just mostly definitions and stuff. So just remember that for now. We'll revisit it again in another chapter. Alright, so this brings me to density altitude. Density altitude is pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature. And there's a lot of ways that we can calculate this. The density altitude chart, you read up from your temperature, so whatever your temperature is in Celsius at the bottom of the chart, you read up to your pressure altitude, then you read across. And then it'll give you a density altitude reading for your day. Now, keep in mind, this is only going to really work on super hot days, so typically if it's below a standard day, you're going to have better performance, and those calculations aren't going to be as critical as if you're working at a high altitude airport on a hot day. So keep that in mind. Again, we'll go more into detail once we get to the performance chapter of this book, but for now, all you need to know is atmospheric pressure, how it changes, and how you can read it. The next thing we're going to be talking about is lift. So the book starts going into about Newton's laws and Bernoulli's laws, and Newton's 3 laws of whatever. First law is for an object at rest will stay at rest unless acted on by an outside force. Second law is force equals mass times acceleration. And third law, for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction. Great, those are great, but we're going to focus a little more on Bernoulli's principle today because it's going to help us explain how lift is created. The definition of Bernoulli's principle is when air is increased in flow, it decreases in pressure. So the faster the air flows, the less pressure it exerts. So slower air, high pressure; faster air, low pressure. And we're going to see how you can manipulate that here in a couple seconds. First, we're going to get into what actually an airfoil looks like. So if we were to cut a wing in half, we would get this lovely little picture, this cross section of the wing. So if we're looking at it straight on. Over here we have the leading edge, over here we have the trailing edge, and this dashed line is the chord line. The curvature of the wing is also known as the camber. So we have a lower camber and an upper camber, and all of the way this is shaped affects how the air flows over the wing. And when air flows over the wing, according to Bernoulli's principle, or when air flows, depending on its speed, it has changes of pressure. So when we have air flowing under the wing, it actually flows slower, creating higher pressure on the bottom of the wing. And when it flows over the wing, it's flowing faster, so it's creating low pressure. I can't do this upside down. Low pressure. So as a result, it pushes that wing up. Now we can control how much pressure is under the wing based on our angle of attack. The definition of angle of attack is the angle of the chord line to the relative wind. Relative wind is just the wind flowing over the wing, or the angle at which relative wind is just the direction of the wind coming towards the wing. So by manipulating the controls in the airplane, we can change an angle of attack from this to this. And that took me a really long time to do that. So you can see here that we're pitched up a little bit more, but when we do pitch up, we're actually changing where the center of lift or center of pressure is located. So as we pitch up, the center of lift goes forward. So during our first example, the center of lift would be here, but as we pitch up or the angle of attack increases, it moves forward. And this is important to note because once we get into the next lesson about the four forces of flight and aerodynamics, you're going to really need to understand this concept. Lastly, I'm going to talk about wingtip vortices. Now, along the wing, we have this high pressure starting at the root of the wing, and it goes out, and then low pressure on the top. As it reaches the end, the high pressure catches the low pressure and causes this rotation motion. This is known as wingtip vortices. Those can be very, very dangerous in the event that a large heavy aircraft is landing in front of you, and us in a tiny little 152 or Diamond DA-20, we really can be affected by those wingtip vortices, and it can cause us to flip. Of course, that's another thing that we're going to get into more in depth later on in this series, but for now, this is all you need to know. Alright, so to reiterate for chapter 4, or sum it all up, we need to know air, it acts like a fluid, the definition of viscosity, the definition of friction, the definition of pressure. You also need to know what atmospheric pressure is, how we can measure it, what is a standard day, as well as the definitions of pressure altitude and density altitude. Alright, and for the second half, make sure you know what an airfoil is. Make sure you can explain and point out the different parts of an airfoil, chord line, leading edge, trailing edge. Understand how the angle of attack affects the center of pressure or the center of lift. Really, in this chapter, it's all just a lot of words and helping you to understand the concepts, but the concepts themselves are actually pretty basic and pretty easy to go over. So, if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment below. I did figure that out finally. It took a really long time. YouTube changed some user agreement things, so yeah. I hope you enjoyed the vlog today. Don't forget to leave a big thumbs up, ask any questions down in the comment section, and stay tuned for chapter 5. Bye!